Trombone Shorty.
By Troy, Trombone Shorty Andrews.
Illustrated by Caldecott Honor winner Brian Collar.
Where you at? Where you at? We have our own way of living down here in New Orleans, and our own way of talking too. And that's what we like to say when we tell a friend hello. So, where you at? Lots of kids have nicknames, but I want to tell you the story of how I got mine. Just like when you listen to your favorite song, let's start at the beginning, because this is a story about music. But before you can understand how much music means to me, you have to understand how important it is to my hometown, my greatest inspiration. I grew up in a neighborhood in New Orleans called Treme. Any time of day or night, you could hear music floating in the air. And there was music in my house, too. My big brother James played the trumpet so loud, you could hear him halfway across town. He was the leader of his own band, and my friends and I would pretend to be in his band, too. "Follow me," James would say. There's one time every year that's more exciting than any other, Mardi Gras. Parades fill the streets and beaded necklaces are thrown through the air to the crowd. I love the brass bands with their own trumpets, trombones, saxophones, and biggest brass instrument of them all, the tuba, which rests over the musician's head like an elephant's trunk.
Where you at? Where you at?
The musicians would call. All day long I could see brass bands parade by my house while my neighbors danced along. I love these parades during Mardi Gras because they made everyone forget about their troubles for a little while. People didn't have a lot of money in Treme, but they always had a lot of music. Listen to all these sounds and mix them together, just like how we make our food. We take one big pot and throw in sausage, crab, shrimp, chicken, vegetables, rice, whatever's in the kitchen, and stir it all together and let it cook. When it's done, it's the most delicious taste you've ever tried. We call it gumbo, and that's what I want my music to sound like. Different styles combined to create my own musical grumbo. But first, I needed an instrument. The great thing about music is you don't even need a real instrument to play. So my friends and I decided to make our own. We might have sounded different from the real brass bands, but we felt like the greatest musicians of Treme. We were making music, and that's all that mattered. Then, one day, I found a broken trombone that looked too beaten up to make music anymore. It didn't sound perfect, but finally, with a real instrument in my hand, I was ready to play. The next time the parade went by my house, I grabbed that trombone and headed out into the street. My brother James noticed me playing along and smiled proudly. "Trombone Shorty," he called out, because the instrument was twice my size.
"Where you at?"
From that day on, everyone called me Trombone Shorty. I took that trombone everywhere I went and never stopped playing. I was so small that sometimes I fell right over to the ground because it was so heavy, but I always got back up, and I learned to hold it up high. I listened to my brother play songs over and over and taught myself those songs too. I practiced day and night, and sometimes I fell asleep with my trombone in my hands. One day, my mom surprised me with tickets to the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, the best and biggest music festival in town. We went to see Bo Diddley, who my mom said was one of the most important musicians of all time. As I watched him on stage, I raised my trombone to my lips and started to play along. He stopped his band in the middle of a song and asked the crowd,
"Who's that playing out there?"
Everyone started pointing, but Bo Diddley couldn't see me because I was the smallest one in the place. So my mom held me up in the air and said, "That's my son, Trombone Shorty."
"Well, Trombone Shorty, come on up here,"
Bo Diddley said. The crowd passed me overhead until I was standing on stage next to Bo Diddley himself. I walked right up to the microphone and held my trombone high in the air, ready to blow.
"What do you want to play?"
Bo Diddley asked. "Follow me," I said. After I played with Bo Diddley, I knew I was ready to have my own band. I got my friends together. We called ourselves the 5 o'clock band because that was the time we went out to play each day after finishing our homework. We played all around New Orleans. I practiced, and soon my brother James asked me to join his band. When people wondered who the kid in his band was, he'd proudly say,
"That's my little brother, Trombone Shorty."
"Where you at?" And now I have my own band called Trombone Shorty and Orleans Avenue, named after a street in Treme. I've played all around the world, but I always come back to New Orleans. And when I'm home, I make sure to keep my eyes on the younger musicians in town and help them out, just like my brother did for me. Today, I play at the same New Orleans Jazz Festival where I once played with Bo Diddley. And when the performance said, I lead a parade of musicians around, just like I used to do in the streets of Treme with my friends. "Where you at? Where you at?" I keep saying, I keep my trombone in my hands and will never let go of it. Author's note. I like to say that the city of New Orleans raised me. In Treme, music was everywhere, from church to the streets to my very own house. My grandfather, Jesse Hill, was a musician, and my brother James was a musician, and I wanted to be just like them. There were people always coming and going from my house, but music was the thing that we always had in common. No matter how tough things got, listening to music always made me feel better. When I was very young, my neighbors, friends, and I would pretend that we were like brass bands and would parade down our streets, and because we couldn't afford instruments, we really did make them out of whatever we could find. The box with 12-pack of sodas could be fastened around the neck with Mardi Gras beads to become a drum, and pencils became drumsticks. I used to hoist a big wheel bicycle over my shoulders and pretend it was a tuba. Empty bottles became horns and wind instruments. Thankfully, I got my first trombone when I was 4 years old, and by age 6, I was leading my own band. The only reason I succeeded as a musician was because I practiced every day. Practice was easy to do because I love playing music so much. I knew that if I just kept playing, good things would happen to me. I felt it in my bones. I played around town with my friends for many years, and together we tried to soak in everything we could about incredible musical traditions of New Orleans. I felt lucky that the previous generations of New Orleans musicians want to share their craft with me. It was my job to carry on musical heritage. I attended the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, NOCCA, and started to develop my own musical style, one that paid tribute to New Orleans' own jazz, blues, and gossips, but also mixed in other kinds of musics that I loved, like rock and roll, funk, and hip-hop. I called it super funk rock. My music caught the eye of Lenny Kravitz, and at age 19, I joined the horn success section of his band. This led to performing with other incredible musicians over the years, such as U2, Green Day, Epic Clapton, B.B. King, Prince, and many more. I performed my own band, Trombone Shorty, in New Orleans Avenue, and together we've released 3 studio albums and even played at the Grammy Awards. In 2012, I had honored of performing for President Barack Obama at the White House for a Black History Month celebration. In 2013, I chose to play the Convented Close set at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, the same festival where I performed with Bo Diddley when I was a child. As important as it was for me to carry the touch for the music of New Orleans, it's even more important for me to make such that this tradition continues. In 2010, I launched the Trombone Shorty Foundation and Trombone Shorty Music Academy to make sure that the music and culture of New Orleans stayed alive. When I've been fortunate enough to travel the world and share my music, I've always returned home to New Orleans. Nothing has been more inspiring to me than working with children there. I wanted to write this book to try and inspire hope in kids who might be growing up under difficult circumstances, but who also have a dream, just like I did. I'm living proof that as long as you work hard, you can make your dreams take flight.
Illustrator's note: the images for Trombone Shorty were painted in watercolor and collage. It felt it was important to depict the sound of music as beautiful colors and shapes that swirl out of Troy's trombone. Even the balloons that you see dancing throughout the book represent music always being around and floating through the air. By the end of the book, these balloons have transformed into large hot air balloon, powered by the force of Troy Andrews' horn. This balloon first transports Troy's musical message over the city of New Orleans, but as Troy grows, his music has the power to soar over the entire world.
One of my favorite images in this book is one of Troy and his friends with their homemade instruments. The neighborhood called Faubourg Treme, known as Treme, where Troy was born and raised, is both historic and musically rich. Troy always had music and musical heroes to look up to, like his big brother, James, but becoming a great musician takes a lot of practice, hard work, and sacrifice, and you need instruments. The fact that Troy and his friends constructed their own makeshift instruments until they could get real ones conveyed both their strong desire to imitate the older musicians they loved and to make music themselves. To me, this showed the hope and promise in these boys. So I decided to give them crowns in my painting, because early on they were like royalty. I've been lucky enough to spend time with Troy Andrews and experience what a warm-hearted person and amazing talent he is. I was blown away as I watched Troy mesmerize crowds time and time again with his hornplay. I am honored to be part of this book, and I can't wait for our next collaboration.
About the Trombone Shorty Foundation. The mission of the Trombone Shorty Foundation is to preserve the rich musical history of New Orleans. The Trombone Shorty Foundation and Tulane University partnered to create the Trombone Shorty Music Academy, which provides music and business education, instruction, and mentorship experience to New Orleans high school students who are gifted music. Experienced instructors help young, underserved musicians express themselves and pursue their dreams while also supporting their community. Please visit www.tromboneshortyfoundation.org.